Okay, in this video we are going to be talking about how to shade a sphere. Before we talk about shading forms, we need to talk a little bit about light so that we can put the correct values in the right places. So I have a light source right over here. It is a lamp, so it's coming from this direction. So the brightest part of my sphere will be right at the top. Then as I move across the sphere, it gets darker as you move further away from the light. Then we can't forget, once you set it down, it also has a shadow, which is called the cast shadow. You can see it right there. And then there's also a reflected light. So if I take this piece of paper and I bring it closer to my sphere, if I bring it closer to my sphere, that paper will reflect. See how that side gets brighter when I move it closer? The white of the paper reflects onto that sphere. So we've got our highlight, which will be closest to wherever your light source is. In the middle we've got midtones. Then across here we've got our core shadow, that's furthest away. And then we also have our cast shadow and our reflected light. So one more time, we've got our highlight, our midtones, that's like the middle values, not the furthest away yet. Then we've got core shadow, which is the furthest. And then we've got our reflected light from the paper. Again, as you get that paper closer, brightens up. And then we've got our cast shadow, which is the shadow that's on the ground. Makes it look like it's not floating in the air. So when you're starting to shade a sphere, the first thing you need to do is draw a circle. So I'm just going to take a regular pencil and I'm going to very lightly sketch a circle. When you're sketching like this, it helps to make little lines. Don't just try to do it all at once. But if you pick up your pencil multiple times, then you can correct your shape as you go. You can turn your paper if that helps. And try to make this as light as you can. Okay, there is my sphere. I'm going to erase some of my extra lines that I don't need. And then I'm just going to drag my eraser across the whole thing so that it lightens it up a little bit. Because I don't want to see these lines by the time I'm done. So I've got a sphere, or a circle. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do some value mapping. So if you remember when I had my sphere here, the brightest part of your sphere is closest to the light. Okay, I know this camera kind of washes everything out, but I promise you there's a highlight there. So I'm going to go back to my value scale, and my highlight I'm going to want between 1 and 2. So I'm going to draw out where I want my highlight, which is closest to my light, which is right up here. So pretend I've got a little sun. Okay, then my midtones are going to be right in here. I'm probably going to want to be between 3 and 4. My core shadow is the furthest away. That's my 5 or 6. And then I've got a little strip of reflected light right here along the edge of my sphere, and then I've also got my cast shadow. Your cast shadow is going to look just like the shape that it is, just elongated a little bit. So it just kind of comes out and curves around. So I'm just going to bring it out and then curve it behind. So there's the start of my sphere. We could put our numbers in there. We want this to be like a 1, let's say 4, 6, and then our shadow will be 7. And then our reflected light will be like a, we'll say 4. Okay, so now I'm going to take my shade pencil and I'm going to start shading in my 1. You can also start at your 4 if you'd like to, kind of like we did with the value scale. Then I'm going to move into my midtones. Now I don't want it to be a really harsh transition. I want you to make it as steady as you can. So what I mean by that is you're going to want to go through the different shades that you have. So my 1, I'm going to change my 1 into a 2, and then this all here is like a 3, and then as I get closer to my 6, I'm going to move to my core shadow. I'm going to get to that 4. Notice that I'm shading in a direction of my sphere. I'm kind of shading in a curved way. And then I can even move into my 6, but don't forget about 5 in the middle. So we've got 1 into 4, go through 3, and remember these numbers are from this. We've got 1, and then I'm going to go 2, 3, 4. So we're transitioning slowly. I don't want it to just be between each of those transition really light and then really dark. You don't want to see any harsh lines like that. Now when I come around here, I'm just going to bring my move my pencil in like little tiny circles. I'm going to curve around. This is all still pretty light up here. I don't want to get quite to a 4. I'm more in like a 2 or a 3 on this side because it's closer to the light. Still not as light as that highlight though. And my shadow, my core shadow. Okay, just gonna stand up here for a second. Looks like there's a little bit more blending. I'm just gonna go over areas where I see texture from my pencil to try and get it as smooth as I can. I just want to kind of go over it in a circular motion. That'll help smooth out some of those areas. And then I think I want my core shadow to be a little bit darker too, just to make it a little bit more dramatic. And then my reflected light right over here, I'm just going to lighten up just a little bit. Now I'm going to look at the shape of my sphere and make sure I don't want to make any adjustments. I'm going to get rid of this outside line here. I'm going to go over this one more time. And then I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to erase that one and just kind of fill that back in. And try to blend out this area a little bit. I think my change is a little bit too harsh. Now if you end up forgetting about your highlight or it's maybe a little bit too dark, you can always take your pencil, and I'm not really erasing too hard, but I'm just kind of lightening up. I'm just kind of like touching it with my eraser almost. Don't press too hard because you don't want to see an erased patch. And I'm just kind of bouncing it, maybe is a good word, around my highlight area. Just try to blend it a little bit. So there's the start of my sphere. I could still go back and keep shading in some of these areas. I'm noticing my core shadow looks a little bit off. But let's move to the cast shadow. This is going to be the darkest, so we're going to want a 7 here. Especially when you're up against your shape, you really want it to stand out. So I'm going to kind of make like a line around my shape so I can see where my shape ends. I don't want it to just blend right into my shadow, so definitely make this the darkest part. Then as you move out towards the edges of your shadow, you can lighten up a little bit because it's getting brighter out here. So if you look at this, you'll notice it's darkest right by the sphere, and then as you go out it gets lighter. So I'm just going to put some more 7 in here. Number 7 is our darkest value. And then as I move out, especially towards these edges, you can lighten up a little bit. Obviously this is not very blended yet. But I'll just keep going over it. And there I have my sphere.